Hello and welcome to today's reflection. Our current world has been massively influenced by the message of Jesus Christ. This has been particularly true in this country over the last 1,000 years or more. Many of our values and laws are based on Christian principles. And one of the key players in bringing the Christian message to Europe was, of course, the Apostle Paul. It's hard to think of one man who has had a more profound effect and lasting effect on our lives than him. But his life and work were a constant struggle. However, the story of the challenges he faced can be of great encouragement to us in the struggles we face. Back in Acts chapter 19, when Paul was in Ephesus, we read that he planned to visit Jerusalem and then to head to Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire, which was effectively the hub of the world at that time. It was a strategic place for the spread of the gospel. But when Paul is arrested in Jerusalem, we're left with the question, how can he possibly get to Rome? Well, yesterday's passage ended with these words. The Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." And as we read on, we discover how important that reassurance must have been to him, because the journey to Rome is going to be frustratingly slow and extremely eventful. Let's read Acts chapter 23, verses 12 to 35. The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in the plot. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We've taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here." But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, she went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him. So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, "Paul the prisoner sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "Some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 men are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they've killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to the request." The commander dismissed the young man with this warning, "Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me." Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He wrote a letter as follows: "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, and there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him." So the soldiers carried out their orders, took Paul with them during the night, and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. Challenges. I wonder what you consider the biggest challenge we face today is. In the short term, of course, there's the pandemic, which threatens many people's lives and livelihoods. On top of that, there's the challenge of accelerating climate change with the resulting increased frequency of extreme weather. But for Christians, our great challenge is that of continuing to fulfill that task that Jesus gave his first disciples, to pass on the good news to those who are lost without God in their lives. And as we read today's passage, I was reminded of 3 key factors for facing the challenges of today. The first is strategic, proactive thinking. The Apostle Paul had set his sights on Jerusalem and Rome. He knew it would be a difficult and costly journey, as the prophet Agabus had told him in chapter 21. But Paul is undeterred. His big vision drives him on. So for us, whether it be in tackling COVID-19, responding to climate change, or the challenge of passing on the good news, let's pray for leaders who will be strategic and proactive in their thinking, be prepared to make costly decisions for their long-term benefit. The second factor is sensible, responsive action. There's a plot to assassinate Paul. More than 40 men take an oath that they won't eat or drink until they've killed Paul. But thankfully, Paul's nephew heard about the plot. And despite the risk to himself, he acts. He goes to the fortress to tell Paul, and Paul sends to the commander, and the commander takes the information extremely seriously and orders a huge escort of hundreds of soldiers to take him the 35 miles or so to Antipatris, leaving at 9 o'clock that evening. That's quite something in the days before street lights and decent roads. Paul's nephew's courageous action saves Paul's life. We too need to react wisely to the daily challenges we face. So let's pray for our national leaders, our church leaders, and indeed ourselves, for an appropriate response to the frequently changing situation in the current pandemic, in a way that saves lives and supports those at risk. Or in the climate crisis, let's pray that we all may react with compassion to those particularly hit by extreme weather, rather than just thinking, I'm okay, it doesn't affect me. And in the challenge to grow the church, let's pray that we make the most of every opportunity that God gives us each day to share the gospel, even if that involves taking risks. The third factor for successfully facing challenges is simply this: trust God's sovereignty. Trust God's sovereignty. The Lord said to Paul, you must testify in Rome. Yes, Paul is strategically proactive. Yes, he's sensibly reactive. But what keeps him going is his trust in God. The journey to Rome won't be plain sailing. It literally won't be plain sailing. There's a shipwreck in Acts 27. But we see throughout these chapters of the book of Acts, God's amazing sovereignty, even over the fickle decisions of Roman commanders and governors. Trust God's sovereignty. I want to end with the opening verses of Psalm 27, which speak of King David's trust in God's sovereignty and in his protection. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom should I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, It is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then will I be confident. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life.